Hi, this is Paul, and I didn't want to let a day go by without doing a video. I don't have a PowerPoint plan, which might mean I ramble worse than many days, which maybe will make some of the saner of you want to shut off the video right now. But I'm just going to plunge into Vancouver 1, as I call it. And what comes before this are the applause and Brett Weinstein talking a little bit and Sam Harris. Both of them were just kind of making introductory comments. And Jordan Peterson has no introductory comments to make. He wants to jump right into it. So here we go.
All right. So I'm going to jump right into it, I think. Here. So look, this is...
I don't know what that little cut was. I hadn't noticed that before. I've listened to the audio a lot. I haven't actually watched the video much at all. So I might see some things as I watch the video now. So in a sense, I've listened to their arguments quite a bit now, but it's the first time watching them and I didn't notice that little cut before. But again, as I said in my last video, what Peterson's going to do, now I'm going to take this up until the Jane Goodall. Peterson goes down the Jane Goodall road, and at that point in Vancouver 1 here, things really run off the rails. But in this whole first section between when Peterson says, I'm going to jump right in now, and when he gets to Jane Goodall, he is building his railroad. He is constructing his tower of blocks. And Sam Harris starts poking a little bit, but Jordan Peterson isn't going to take the bait on any of these things, and he's going to keep building his argument. And there's a lot of good stuff that comes up in here, and Brett Weinstein has a lot of good things to say in here, so let's listen.
I put up a poll a couple of days ago to find out what people, broadly speaking, might want us to discuss, and I've been taking a look at that, and I took a lot of notes, which is why I have my computer here, by the way, and my phone. It's not to check my email while the debate's going on, the discussion. I thought what I might do is just lay out some places that I think Sam and I agree, and because there's lots of places we agree. And then I want to figure out where we disagree, which I've been trying to sort out, and then I want to see if we can hash it out a little bit and move forward on that a bit. So I'm going to...
So Peterson takes the initiative here. Peterson has the plan. He's got a plan in his mind, and Peterson is really driving. You know, I've been trying to think of a metaphor to figure out. This first part is a nice stroll through the. I'm thinking about The Hobbit, but I'm going to put Sam in The Hobbit, and of course, those of you who are Tolkien fans know Sam is in Lord of the Rings. Sam isn't in The Hobbit, so there's a little Sam Harris, Sam Gamgee thing I'm working in my mind. But Jordan Peterson is going to. They're going to be on Bjorn's ponies heading to Mirkwood, and once we hit Jane Goodall and the apes, we're going to descend into Mirkwood, and then we're going to hit all kinds of mess in Vancouver 1. But here we go.
Layout. See, one of the things that Carl Rogers said, the psychologist, was that a good way to have a discussion with someone is to tell them what you think they think until they think that what you said reflects what they said.
Now, they're going to practice this a number of times, and last night I was actually just listening to the Dublin recording, and they started that, and I think there is some practical utility to that method. I don't know that method necessarily solves a lot. I've seen that method used in marriage counseling, and it generally is helpful, but it isn't necessarily going to get us beyond our impasses here.
But like, this is a really useful thing to know if you're ever having a discussion with an intimate partner, for example, is that you have to put their argument back to them in terms they agree with. It's very difficult. So I'm going to try to do that. And so the first thing is, I think that partly what's driving you, if this is accurate, is that you want to ground a structure of ethics in something solid. And there's two things you want to avoid, two catastrophes, let's say. One is the catastrophe that you identified with religious fundamentalism, and the other is the catastrophe that's associated with moral relativism. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, good.
Oh, hey, agreement number 1. Religious fundamentalism. Fundamentalism, that could very well show up in a Words That Fudge video. So religious fundamentalism, and well, let's let Peterson continue.
Okay. Well, no, but this. Okay, so it's crucially important that we get this right now. So,
See, he's setting up the blocks. Peterson has a project in mind, and he is moving down. He is heading down the road.
And that's something that I think we really agree on, because I've conceptualized that slightly different than you, and that might be relevant, but I think of that as a pathology of order and a pathology of chaos. So the terminology is slightly different, but I think we're working on the same axis. So
is, I guess, the arbitrary as chaos, and the fundamentalism, a little bit later, the fundamentalism as in secular fundamentalism in the Soviet Union and in China, and religious fundamentalism, their order. I could see that.
So that's the first thing. And then in order to do that, it seems to me, that's your first priority. And then maybe your second priority is something like, you see undue suffering in the world, plenty of it, and you would think that things would be better if that wasn't the case, and that this morality, whatever it's going to be, is at least going to ground itself in part on the presupposition that the less undue suffering in the world, the better.
So the first priority is avoiding arbitrary dogmas, and see, this is where Peterson's chaos order doesn't quite map onto Sam Harris's, but I understand where Peterson's going. It's interesting that the first he sees Sam's first priority. Now remember, these are priorities, so one is over the other. They're in a hierarchy. The first priority is that things be grounded in the world. Okay, and obviously they're going to spend almost all of their time talking about how things can be grounded in the world, because of course Sam is going to want to say these are grounded in facts, and then they're going to delve into deep conversations basically about what is a fact, because Harris wants to keep saying fact, 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 and Jordan keeps seeing Harris point to things that Jordan says, that's not really a fact. That's something else than a fact. You've added something there and are calling it a fact. So we'll get there.
Is that also reasonable?
Yeah, I would just add to that the positive side of the continuum as well. So when as you know, the phrase I use, or the word I use for this is well-being.
Yep.
And I know from having, I don't think we spoke about this on my podcast, but from having seen you in other interviews, I think you think that phrase doesn't capture everything one could reasonably want. But I think it does. I mean, it's an elastic suitcase term for a reason, and it's...
Okay, right there. Well-being is an elastic suitcase term for reason. Now, if you listen to this, this is the happy time again until we get into Mirkwood. If you listen to this carefully, what Sam Harris actually does, and many times with these little comments, he defines his terms. So, well-being and reason are the same thing, which is a very interesting association, because he's going to also want to say that reason yields well-being, but here he says reason is well-being. And what you're going, if you listen to him very carefully in terms of how he uses this word reason, Peterson later will accuse him of using reason as a black box. I would say he uses reason more as a black velvet cloth, and he covers, okay, well-being, there's an elastic suitcase. Let's call that reason. This process that will yield well-being, let's call that reason. Let's see how many different kinds of reason we can find with Sam Harris.
It's actually, in reading your book, I realize there's a point of contact here, because you use the word being, capital B, being, with as though it were imbued with significant gravitas.
Well, again, being with capital B, Peterson is kind of pointing to Heidegger. And okay, Sam, your point.
So for me, and I agree with you, that's an appropriate use of being. And for me, well-being is simply just the positive side of being. There's the negative side, the suffering we want to mitigate. But I think however good consciousness can be in this universe, that the well-being for me subsumes all of those possibilities.
Okay. Now there's something a little interesting, and actually Brett Weinstein will bring this up a little bit later, in that Sam Harris with his well-being has a time problem. Now, again, if you listen to my past videos about a monarchical vision, well, what is a monarchical vision? Monarchical vision is kind of like your grandma's parlor. No, maybe the Dutch will probably get this. For a lot of Dutch immigrants, this probably goes back to the Netherlands. There's this one room in your house. It's the best room. And as a kid, you can never go in there to play. And you wonder what this room is for. And then some high status person comes into your home and they get to sit in this room. But that room is in a sense timeless, okay? And so a big problem with Sam Harris's, okay, so well-being is reason, or reason leads to well-being. A big problem with Sam Harris's scheme here is that you've got the question of time. And as I wanted to do a video before this one, but I haven't had time to work out the PowerPoint, so I'm just ad-libbing this one. A great example is the daughter who comes home with the motorcycle gang member and says, "I'm in love. He makes me happy." Now, I didn't mean to slur the motorcycle gang members, but your child comes home with a romantic interest that you look at and say, this is a disaster. Now, you may be right or you may be wrong, because sometimes they do work out. But in that moment, the daughter sees her well-being very clearly. And this is part of the problem with Sam Harris's scheme, because I think this imagining the world as a place of objects is kind of like that Dutch parlor where this room that's never touched. It sits outside of time and all the objects are there. Well, time is a very big deal. And what works for me right now, and they'll get into this a little bit when they talk about cocaine, what works for me right now, what makes me deliriously happy, might not work for me tomorrow. And Peterson talks about The Simpsons where, you know, Homer is drinking and his wife says, well, you shouldn't be doing that drinking. And well, that's for future Homer to worry about. And this is part of the upgrade, that understanding the world as a realm for action, a forum for action, is over a monarchical vision of a static world, because we do live in time and the world is not static. And this gets into some of the things that clump in terms of this monarchical vision and a timeless world. These are all moments, and science is very capable of looking at moments and looking at certain processes. And so Sam Harris is going to say, well, reason is basically our capacity to control these processes, to deliver on good outcomes, to deliver on this well-being, which is a fairly static thing that's imagined, this well-being. And, well, the problem you're going to have is time, in that this chocolate cake might seem very much within my well-being now, but eating this chocolate cake every night for the next 20 years is going to cause real problems for my well-being. And you can say, well, reason can help tell us that, but there are many things in this world that we don't know. And it was either in Maps of Meaning or Personalities, where Jordan Peterson talks about the car, which I think is a tremendous example, because we look at a car and you say, well, a car is an object in space. And Peterson says, no, a car is way, way more than that. A car is an incredibly efficient processing device that transforms fossil fuel into carbon dioxide. And a byproduct of that transformation is movement. And so you can imagine that if it were our goal to transform fossil fuels into carbon dioxide, the internal combustion engine would be just a very effective way of doing this. And we just had the collateral effect of us wanting to get places, and that is doing it. Or a car is the way that we transform all of our urban areas. Or a car is a way that 30,000 people die on highways every year and we don't think anything of it. Or a car is, and that's where you get into the problem of well-being is not a simple thing. Now, I was just having a conversation with someone and I was talking about the way we often, and again, Peterson talks about this too, the way we often reduce poverty to a function of money. But you can go to the best neighborhoods of Sacramento and see people living impoverished lives where they have no reason for material want. Think about Howard Hughes dying naked with his jars full of his own urine. Howard Hughes died poor, although he had plenty of money. In other words, well-being is a very difficult thing. And what you're going to hear Sam Harris say over and over again is that whenever Jordan Peterson says something like that, Sam Harris is going to say, well, my well-being encompasses that. My well-being encompasses that. And when I listen to this, it reminds me of when I used to play games with my sisters. And, you know, you might be across the table and you're shooting at each other. And one person gets the bright idea to say, I have a bulletproof shield. And then the other person gets the idea of thinking, okay, they have a bulletproof shield. I'm going to start shooting bombs. And then the other person says, I have a bomb-proof shield. And then the other person starts thinking about what's bigger than a bomb, and then the other person says, I have an everything shield. And Sam Harris again and again defaults to this everything shield. My well-being includes everything. Now, Sam Harris might rightly say to Christians, well, that's kind of what your God is. And yeah, that's sort of true. But that's part of what goes into, let's say, someone mentioned to me the other day, Jordan Peterson's first biblical series, pay attention that it's entitled The Idea of God, that you have this idea. Now, again, if we say, well, obviously as a Christian, I say God is more than an idea, but if God is at least an idea, God number one, and my God number one and God number two, if it's at least an idea, you want an idea that takes care of everything. And when we devise fictions, we do it all the time. Now, Sam Harris has stories make him itch, it seems, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about stories, but Sam Harris, in a sense, and Jordan Peterson keeps tagging him on this, concocts a story where he says, well, well-being is an everything term. It's this elastic suitcase that is reason. And again, it's like, wait a minute, reason? Now, I would better understand you if you'd say reason is a tool by which we colonize things in this world that we are able to in order to bring ourselves into this place of well-being. I can understand that, but I don't understand well-being as reason.
Okay, well, so I focused on the suffering element, I think, as I've done in my own work, because I actually think it's easier to zero in on in some sense. Like, I think it's easier for people, and I think you lay out the argument in the moral landscape kind of like this. I think it's easier perhaps to gain initial agreement between people on what might constitute a generalized ethic, to concentrate on what we don't want. Yeah. I'm not saying that what we do want is unimportant, but it seems to me to be harder to get a grip on. We don't want Auschwitz. We don't want the Gulag Archipelago. So, and there are...
And I would add, to just closing the door to moral relativism here, those who do want Auschwitz are wrong to want Auschwitz. I mean, it's obviously right. Auschwitz only happened because some people did want Auschwitz, not the victim side, but the perpetrator side.
And this gets into some of the trickiness of well-being, too. Because, obviously, in the minds of some, Auschwitz was a reasonable tool to appropriate and wield in pursuit of their well-being. Now, if you go back again to Peterson and his Piaget equilibrated game, this has to, if well-being is working for some people but not for other people, well, then it's not full well-being. It's not the elastic suitcase there where you have everything. But again, you have the problem, and this is going to be with all of Sam Harris's stuff, who decides well-being? So let's say the now maybe I'm in my mid-50s now, and my kids are now coming into their 20s, and so my mind turns to the thought of grandchildren, much to my children's dismay. So I think, I have grandchildren to look forward to. I loved children. I'm really excited about grandchildren, but there are no grandchildren on the horizon right now, and none of my children are married, so I'd really like there to be no grandchildren yet. I want my grandchildren to land in a home that is ready for them. But here's what we have with human beings. We have conflicting desires. Now, I don't think my desire for grandchildren is religious. I think it's probably more biological than anything else, but my children might say, having children is not in my view of well-being. The world is just full of conflict over well-being. In fact, set aside all the religious stuff. Imagine a space, however you define religion. Now I'm doing a Sam Harris type thing. Imagine your non-religious utopia. You're going to get rid of conflict so you've got well-being. And one of the things that Sam never addresses that I heard in any of this is the relationship between well-being and desire, even though someone might very well say, well, the definition of well-being is desires fulfilled. So are we all going to desire the same thing? Do we all desire the same thing for ourselves as others? In a world of limited resources, is it the case that me having more means you having less? And what if I want more? What if there isn't enough to go around? And later Peterson will go into this, that throughout most of human history, resources were scarce, hard decisions had to be made, and reason was often applied to it. But again, once you employ reason, now suddenly you have your hierarchy of values stacking up. And you might say, we're going to send this child to college and not these other two kids because why? Because this child is a man and women won't have the same economic potential, because this child got better grades in earlier school, because this child is my favorite. Again, boom, immediately you got a hierarchy of values coming up, and then reason is employed, but reason is not well-being there. Reason is, read Jonathan Haidt, reason is so often, now I've been listening to Node and Network and the Ian McGill-Chris stuff, reason is often the left brain jumping in to make up a reason for the right brain to get what it wants. So what is the relationship between well-being and desire?
And so crucially for me is the claim that I'm a realist, I'm a moral realist, and what realism means is that there are right and wrong answers to questions of this kind.
Okay, so in past videos I've talked, and we're going to go back again to Dallas Willard. And actually in one of my meetups I mentioned moral knowledge. So there is, according to both Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson here, a moral structure in the universe that is a real thing. Now, it's very interesting if we back this up. What kind of thing is that? Does it exist? Does it exist? Does that moral knowledge exist like Santa Claus? Does that moral knowledge exist like water being hydrogen and oxygen? Does that moral knowledge exist like math? Where does that moral knowledge come from? Does it come from, I think Sam Harris would say, it comes from physics. And now Peterson is going to say, well, this is Peterson. It's okay, it's built up by us watching each other, but towards what end? What is the telos? And again, this is another thing that is stalking these conversations that they really can't get into, which is what is What is the end here? And so, okay, well, the end is well-being. Well, whose well-being? Well, well-being for everyone. Okay, can you be more specific? Because, yeah, it's an elastic suitcase, and you equated it with reason, but can you be more specific?
And you cannot know what you're missing. In fact, we almost certainly don't know what we're missing on questions of human value. And our job is to discover.
Don't know what we're missing on questions of human value. See, one of the things that you really we have to work hard in when we listen to these is figuring out, now, what do both of these men mean by value? And I think implicit in this idea of value is, in fact, again, Jordan Peterson's hierarchy. To value something makes it more or less valuable than another thing, is to set it up in a hierarchy. The Elvis's guitar is more valuable than Elton John's glass.
Just how good life can be and just what variables are making it needlessly horrible. And
okay, just how good life can be, but again, we're treating things in a very abstract way here. So right now I can go to how many places in Sacramento and find people who are in nursing homes waiting for death, in dementia, in pain, in misery, and, well, bring them your reason well-being suitcase. Life is about to end for them. What, you gonna hurry them along the way? Isn't that what's reasonable? But again, once you get to that point, you have to say, well, hurrying them along the way, doctor-assisted suicide, is reasonable if, then you're making some presumptions about what even Sam Harris admits he can't know, because it's not accessible to other faculties for reason.
To mitigate all of that and live in a better and better world.
Okay, well, so.
And then Peterson here again, he's not going to get tripped up on the little things, okay? He's working his project forward.
Okay, so that's a lot of points of agreement. So I also believe that there is a catastrophe of arbitrary moral injunction, and that there's a catastrophe of moral relativism, and that
arbitrary moral injunction and moral relativism. So relativism then is kind of the opposite of moral realism. And again, I would love to hear Sam Harris talk about how he's using that word there. What is real about morality in terms of the world conceived as a place of objects? Is morality an object? Is it, when you say there is no God, the denial of ontology there, based on what premises, is being applied now to the ontology of morality?
That has to be dealt with, and that there are genuine differences between the proper way of behaving morally and the improper way of behaving morally. And I think that they are grounded in
the proper way of behaving morally and the improper way of behaving morally. We're getting deep.
Human universals, even though there's a wide amount of variation. So that's a lot of points of agreement, right? So we know that.
What neither, and this will stalk both of them throughout the whole thing. Okay, so I'd love to hear both of them get more specific on their good. Now, because I think stalking Peterson's will be his Darwinian understanding of truth, that morality means that which causes human beings to continue to survive. Okay? I really have no idea the telos for Sam Harris beyond, and I think this perhaps is this timeless stasis of well-being in a moment that, is there with his idea of consciousness. Okay, and a good time was had by all. When? In what moment? Well, in this moment. All that matters is this moment. Okay. But what we're doing, you go back to Jordan Peterson with his delayed gratification, how this kind of almost becomes the development of God in Jordan Peterson's scheme. Again, in Jordan Peterson's scheme, time is factored in a much more appropriate way, because delayed gratification is almost the opposite of, well, I want this moment to be my best moment now, so I will eat the chocolate cake. Delayed gratification says, I'm not going to eat the chocolate cake. Instead, I'm going to go to the gym, and because I am hoping that if I take care of my body now, I will be able to live in my 70s and 80s in a much more fruitful way. Okay, so less well-being now, more well-being later. But again, Sam Harris's scheme is this kind of timeless stasis in which well-being is in a moment outside of time, without time. And again, a little bit later, Jordan Peterson's going to tag him and say, you've kind of set up heaven and hell here.
There's two things we want to avoid, conceptually speaking, which is the moral relativism and this kind of moral absolutism that's grounded in an arbitrary statement of facts that you identify with religious fundamentalism. I would identify that with fundamentalism more generally, not with religious fundamentalism per se, because I see it also happening in secular states, let's say, like Nazi Germany or
And so to try to figure out what Peterson means by fundamentalism there, I think it's not far from Sam Harris's in a too rigid attachment to certain ideas or rules or beliefs that doesn't help us move towards our goal. And you can see right there, again, this question of goals is stalking this conversation and not addressed. And so Sam Harris says, no, my goal is well-being. Okay, whose well-being? Everyone's well-being. When? All time. Even for the person lying in their adult diaper in the nursing home in pain right now? No, I have no hope for them. So well-being for them is doctor-assisted suicide? That's reasonable, but it's only reasonable within a frame of telos and outcomes. Because in a sense, and this is where there's all these implicit things. Well, lack of pain is better than pain, except if you're on the treadmill at the gym because you're trying to bank, you're bringing pain to your body so that you will have less pain later. Yeah, but that's what reason gives you. Okay, but there's a telos there. There's a story there. There's a progression there that gets you from A to B. And in this static stasis, like room, Dutch parlor that Sam Harris is setting up here, there's no accounting for that. And that's why he keeps having to step out of the room and, in a sense, cheat or just hand wave, as they say, to make it work.
So it doesn't seem to be religious fundamentalism per se that's crucial to your argument.
No, it's not.
This is a big deal in here. I'll back it up a little bit.
Just to religious fundamental states, let's say, like Nazi Germany or so it doesn't seem to be religious fundamentalism per se that's crucial to your argument.
No, it's not. So that just to close the loop on that, the only reason why I would focus on religion in particular there is that religion is the only language game wherein fundamentalism and dogmatism.
Now pay attention. He just defined religion as a language game, which is very interesting.
Dogmatism is not a pejorative concept. Dogma is a good.
Religion is the only language game where dogmatism is not a pejorative concept. Someone tweeted me and said dogmatism is probably going to have to make an appearance in your Words That Fudge videos because, well, what exactly is a dogmatism? It's always better than fill in the blank. There's a dogmatism. You're going to hold to that? Reason is always better than arbitrary, supernatural assumptions. Is that a dogmatism? Might Sam Harris find further evidence? Does he have sufficient evidence? because later he's going to define dogmatism as that which we hold with insufficient evidence. Insufficient evidence for whom? Person over here has had some ecstatic experience of the supernatural. Person over here has had none. Does that ecstatic experience of the supernatural qualify as evidence? Evidence towards what? And now we're back into the question of subjectivity. Evidence for me, not evidence for you. What we're going to try and do with science is get to a lowest common denominator, and in a sense, the move they usually make with that is to say, well, the experience, we will call the experience something here, and we'll use that to compare. Well, that's interesting, because people don't work that way with experiences at all. One person hasn't been eating, and they finally get a job, and they go to this job, and they're out there picking strawberries, and they've snuck across the border, and they're working long hours in the hot sun picking strawberries because they're earning dollars, and they're happy as a clam to do it. They have sacrificed and risked greatly, whereas the vast majority of eaters of those strawberries will not be caught dead in that field. And if you brought them out to that field, they would immediately complain about the hot sun and everything. So, okay, whose experience? On what level do you compare these experiences? And this is again part of why science manages certain things well, science and technology, but other things it just doesn't handle well at all. Most notably, people.
Word specifically within Catholicism, and the notion that you must believe things on faith, that is, in the absence of compelling evidence that would otherwise cause a rational person to believe it.
Okay, there he just defined faith for us.
That is in the Catholicism, and the notion that you must believe things on faith.
So faith is that which we don't have compelling evidence for in the light of contradictory evidence that a rational person. Okay, there's that word again. Now pay attention to when he takes rational, he puts it together with people. A little bit later, he's going to complain about religion that would take normally good people and make them go off into Syria and fight for ISIS back when that was happening. So what is a rational person? What is a good person? I thought rational and well-being were kind of the same thing, but now rational is a rational person a well-being person? Or is a rational person someone who can, see, and I would argue, a rational person is someone who can start with the ground and build up a chain of logic to get to an anticipated outcome. Now, we do this all the time, but the universe is very complex, and often we don't get to our outcomes.
That is in the absence of compelling evidence that would otherwise cause a rational person to believe it. That, in a religious context, is considered a feature, not a bug. Elsewhere, we recognize it to be a bug, and that's why the unique.
Okay, so we have this imagined reason, we have this imagined religious context here, where reason is a bug because you're taking things on insufficient evidence, and you've got this other context over here where this is a feature or where this is a bug. What's interesting, and again, this is the video I wanted to make before this because I wanted to make a point about religious people, even in deeply religious contexts, they use reason just like everyone else. They just begin with different premises. And this is one thing that Sam Harris knows, because if you believe that this book is a certain thing, then reason leads you to other things. Now, if the book is a Bible, reason might lead you to certain behaviors. If the book is a medical book or a first aid manual, reason may lead you to other things. Again, reason isn't founding the book. Reason is dictating behavior in alignment with the premises. And again, Ian McGilchrist, in that video I played a while ago, makes that quite clear about exactly what reason is. Reason helps us understand consistency. So the book here says that drinking water out of a drainage ditch could be bad for your health. Well, I'm going to drink it. Well, that's irrational. Why? because you have not followed the premise and you've not followed through. That's what reason does. And this is, in fact, the entire argument and what they're involved in here.
Okay,
Focus on religion.
All right. So is it reasonable to assume that we've already established, at least in principle, that there's an association between the totalitarian regimes, let's say,
and dogmatism, yeah.
and the dogmatism that characterizes religious belief.
Yeah.
What do you think, although at least in principle, the secularist totalitarian states and the religious fundamentalist totalitarian states do differ in one important regard, which is that the religious types ground their axioms in God and the secular totalitarian types don't. And so there's got to be something about totalitarianism.
And I would love for them to have a conversation about what he means by God there, because so a religious group will say God is this, therefore by reason this. A totalitarian group will say, they won't use the word God, but they'll use the universe or the natural order or nature. If you look at an interesting thing to look at is that both, usually the two subjects that come up here are Nazism and Marxism. Marxism bears with it an assumption about a progression of what? A social progression, an economic progression, and all kinds of things are built into that. Nazism assumed that what the universe really is a story of racial progression. Religions have other stories within them. Now, what's interesting about, let's say, Marx's idea is that Marx didn't appeal to a holy book, but looked at history, his take on history, and said, here's a pattern. Boom. Nazis looked at history and said, here's a pattern. Boom. What do religious people usually do, for whom maybe a God doesn't show up or a God is hidden? They say, here's a pattern. I'm working on a sermon on the prophet Nahum. That is a book that most of you have probably not read. It is in the Bible. It is a very short little book, and it talks about the destruction of Nineveh. And, well, how, if you were an ancient Near East potentate, would you try to figure out who are the wise men and who are the bad wise men? Well, it's pretty simple. You write down everything that these imagined wise men, these imagined prophets, these imagined soothsayers would say, and then you keep the writing not in a file cabinet, maybe on little things of clay where they often kept notes. You keep them and you remember them in your head, and you mark out which prophets get it right. So what are you doing? You're looking at a pattern and you're saying, in fact, we do this all the time, because was it Nate Silver who predicted Obama's election? I mean, after the 2008 election, everyone's looking at his page about sports and politics and everything. He thought, Hillary was the favorite to win. She lost. Suddenly, Nate Silver isn't on the news anymore. Why? Well, it's exactly the same thing. Now, obviously, let's take a step out of the Bible to some of the losers of Near Eastern religion. Let's look at Marduk and the Babylonians, or the Assyrians, and Ishtar of the Assyrians. And, well, what was their science and technology about religion? They looked for patterns. They tried to discern them in order to forecast the future. And now Sam Harris would say, well, that was bad, outdated technology. We do better. Okay. Predict the stock market. I don't think you'd be up here talking to Jordan Peterson if you could do that. Well, what does that mean about reason? Reason is being used all along the way.
Per se, that's independent of that's associated with religious belief in the manner that you just described, but that's not particularly associated with the belief in God. There's something that makes them, that's a commonality between them. And so, do you have any sense of what that might be?
Well, I think
now both give these guys they're sitting on stage. This is a very hard thing that they're doing. Most of us couldn't do it anywhere near as well as either of these guys can do it. When you get asked a hard question and you've got a whole audience in front of you and you've got TV cameras in front of you, well, let's think about what the brain does. Well, the brain, you've got the right side of the brain that says, don't want to lose status. I don't want to lose status. He asked a hard question, haven't had a lot of time to think about it. What does the left side of the brain do? Up, 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 up. Here's an answer. Again, look at the split brain. Look at the split brain studies. And the brain just gives answers. Well, are these answers connected to anything? Maybe, maybe not. Because the brain's just given them. And so, here you go, Sam.
one has to acknowledge that there's something uniquely pernicious, at least potentially, about religious beliefs, because
that's a lot of qualifiers.
They have the otherworldly variable, the supernatural variable, the...
So let me get this straight. If your goal is well-being here, and you're going to take away everyone's religion because we have insufficient evidence to imagine life after death, and therefore to posit suffering in this world in order to achieve well-being in the next. So you're going to take that away. And you're talking about killing, you're talking about dogmas. How does this work again? I don't see how you're helping well-being or how religion makes this worse. Now, you might, I've read Elie Wiesel and Viktor Frankl. For a while I was reading a Nazi concentration camp book kick. Did their religious commitments make the suffering in the concentration camp harder because they expected divine deliverance? Maybe. Having no religious beliefs, as many who were killed by the Nazis, and especially the Russians had, I'm sure, did having no religious beliefs make the concentration camp suffering better? I would argue, if you lock me up, I'm going to find my religious beliefs probably greatly helping me. And you say, well, what evidence do you have that? Well, how many people come out of prison Muslim or Christian or with some religious beliefs? And you might say, well, let's use reason let's take God out of the picture and diagnose how that happens. Well, you put them in a hard time, and their minds went to a certain type of escapism that imagined that there was purpose behind all the suffering. There's an atheistic, rationalistic story that accounts for religious belief. And it accounts for religious belief by saying it's in their immediate well-being best interest to adopt the religious belief. So how, again, does getting rid of religious belief help here?
You're going to get everything you want after you die, so this life doesn't matter issue. That allows for a kind of misbehavior that is especially...
Okay, that allows for a kind of misbehavior. Another thing you have to watch is that they're trying to have an argument about how can we find a moral yardstick. And Peterson begins, can't be arbitrary. It's got to somehow be tethered to a reality that we can all agree on. Good. So there's some boundaries in it. We want to find a moral yardstick. Okay. You have the difficulty of you're trying to find a moral yardstick, but all along the way you keep taking elements of your argument and you bring in the moral yardstick and you say, well, this doesn't measure up. Now, wait a minute. I thought this is what we're arguing about. In other words, you can't bring it into the argument when you're trying to make an argument about its existence. You can bring it in if you're using it to try to evaluate it, but what stalks behind this is Sam Harris has his own moral yardstick, and he says, well, this is well-being. But now we're back to the question we had before, well-being when and now. This inappropriate behavior, something that you are valuing, because when you evaluate it as inappropriate, you're already putting a moral yardstick up to it. Where did you get that yardstick if hopefully the yardstick is the outcome of the conversation? You can't bring it at this point into the argument.
So it seems that the claim would be that if you put forward axiomatically your claim that God exists, then you can use that claim to justify whatever arbitrary atrocities your system might throw off.
Yeah, I guess okay. The only point I was making there is that not all dogmas are created equal. I mean, some dogmas are on their face more dangerous and more divisive.
Right,
but they're all bad, right? Because he said that, and he will continue to say that. Well, they're not all created equal. Well, good. I think that's progress because they're not all created equal. So are we allowed to keep the good ones or the less bad ones? And if we're dragged into a concentration camp and we find that religious fantasies are helping our experience of well-being and that we can actually walk nobly up to the gallows because we're finding this is enhancing our well-being, can we have some dogmas, please?
What I'm curious about specifically is, because it seems to me that the dogmas of the USSR and the dogmas of Nazi Germany were as pernicious as any religious dogmas. And they may also share important features with pernicious religious dogmas.
Yeah. But see, Peterson is working he's building his railroad, he's working his argument.
It isn't clear to me, from your perspective, what those commonalities would be.
Well, so, I mean, in some ways you're recapitulating an argument I've made, and this is an argument that I would make against you were you to claim, as you have elsewhere, that atheism is responsible for the greatest atrocities of the 20th century. The idea that Stalinism and Nazism and fascism were expressions of atheism simply doesn't make any sense. I mean, in the case of fascism and Nazism, it doesn't make any sense because the fascists and the Nazis, by and large, were not even atheists. I mean, Hitler wasn't an atheist, and he was talking about executing a divine plan, and he got lots of support from the churches, and the Vatican did nothing to stop him, and fascism, as you know, coexisted quite happily with Catholicism in Croatia and Portugal and Spain and Italy. So, but even in the case of Stalin, what was so wrong with that situation were all of the ways in which it so resembled a religion. You had a personality cult, you had dogmatism that...
Is it religion itself or what religion does? Because they're both going to say, well, so does religion, talk about a genetic fallacy, does religion cause this? Or, and this is where we're going to go to Jane Goodall eventually, does religion cause this? Or is this a human thing? And humans who like to pick up rationalizations and justifications because they're the rider on the elephant and they're trying to make themselves look good. Is religion that which we concoct in order to justify our behavior? Now, that makes a really devastating argument against religion, but that's what you're practically saying here.
Held sway to a point where apostasy and blasphemy were killing offenses. You know, the people who...
Now, right there. So if we're saying, well, what was really wrong? Well, was it thought crimes? And implicit there is blasphemy and apostasy may not be killing offenses. In other words, he's saying, and quite rightly, most of us in the West would agree, there ought not to be thought crimes. But here's the irony. His entire project is trying to say religion is a thought crime and it must be vanquished. Now, fortunately, if you look at my last video, he says some scary things at the end of this. But fortunately, he's not advocating that religious people be locked up. He's advocating that we be persuaded. Now, a little bit later, when we get into the question of what does Sam Harris believe about evil, maybe he'll say that religion is ignorance. So then we have to be educated out of our ignorance. Okay.
Who didn't toe the line were eradicated. And, so to take a more modern example, North Korea is a religious cult. It just doesn't happen to be
Okay. Now we have the really fudgy word of religion. What there do you mean by religion? Is religion something that, a word that we can use to qualify a behavior? This is a religious activity. North Korea is a religious cult, even though North Korea is on paper an atheist cult. This sounds a lot like Jordan Peterson saying, Sam Harris, you act like a Christian. Sam Harris has basically taken Jordan Peterson's argument and flipped it upside down and used it. It says, even though North Korea will say everywhere there is no God, they're religious. It's exactly what Jordan Peterson has been saying to Sam Harris.
One that is focused on the next life or supernatural.
Wait, did I hear that wrong?
Is a religious, so to take a more modern example, North Korea is a religious cult. It just doesn't happen to be a one that is focused on the next life or supernatural claim.
No, I did hear it right. He just basically has done to North Korea what Jordan Peterson has done to him when he calls him a Christian. He's just done the same thing.
So what would be the defining characteristics of a religious totalitarian movement that would make it different from a non-religious totalitarian movement?
Well,
because there's aspects that are similar.
They're very similar. I mean, the problem is dogmatism. The overarching problem is believing things strongly on bad evidence.
Okay, right there. The overarching problem is believing things strongly on bad evidence. Now let's fill out this. Now we're starting to get Sam Harris's argument, okay? So we have a natural capacity to choose for our well-being. We have this problem called dogmatism where we hold on to things rigidly when we have bad evidence for it. Why? Where did this come from? Why did we start doing this? If human beings are the kinds of creatures that rationally will usually choose well-being, happiness and goodness and everything, flexible suitcaseness over bad things, where did we get the dogmas from that we started doing this? Now he'd say, well, some people started using it against other people. Okay, why? Well, it was because it was in their best interest to give these other people dogmas to control them. Well, that's pretty much a postmodern critique. So what you're saying is that these religious people who are giving dogmas to other people themselves aren't really religious because they know they're fooling it. So let's imagine a bunch of people who live in a village, and you have strawberries and you have rotten potatoes. And so what all the people in power, what the elites tell everyone is that the rotten potatoes are really good food for you. And if you eat those rotten potatoes, then God will bless you and usher you into the next life. And then all of those elites actually eat strawberries. Now, that's not a bad story because this kind of stuff happens in religious communities all the time. But well-being and rationality doesn't really work because you would pretty much get the idea that what will happen is that the people eating the rotten tomatoes are going to watch the people eating the strawberries and say, hey, wait a minute. And that game isn't going to last long. Not 11 or 15,000 years at least. So where did this game come from? Or are we back to the fact that in this world, we don't have a clear idea of what is good for us. We don't even know what to eat at this day and age. What should people eat? We don't do it. We don't have an idea of what is well-being. Is nowhere near as obvious to us individually or communally. It's most obvious to us in a moment. Well, it would be my well-being to turn on the air conditioning in this building because I'm a little warm. But I don't turn on the air conditioning in this building because I don't want to spend the church's money and on electricity just for me alone. And, oh, maybe I'm a religious person, so I'm suffering for Jesus sitting here with a fan on me instead of the air conditioning. If I was a real Christian, I'd turn off the fan, but fans don't use as much air conditioning as the whole building. So on and on and on and on and on.
And and the reason why dogmatism is so dangerous is that it doesn't allow us to revise our bad ideas in real time through conversation. Dogmas have to be enforced by force or the threat of force.
See, and even that, so let's get to the rotten potato eaters and the strawberry eaters. There's not going to be he's got both. It's got to be imposed by force. So the strawberry eaters have to keep the potato eaters eating their rotten potatoes and don't let them know that there are strawberries to be had. Well, probably the strawberry eaters, if there were enough strawberries to feed the whole town, the strawberry eaters probably wouldn't have cared because you can only eat so many strawberries. But, so which is it? Is it the lack of a conversation or is it control?
Because the moment someone has a better idea, you have to shut it down in order to preserve your dogmas.
Okay. So the commonality seems to be something like claims of absolute truth at some level that you're no longer allowed to discuss.
Yeah.
Okay, and so
claims that you're no longer allowed to discuss. That does happen in churches. But there's a lot of discussion in churches. And this is where we get into the question of the relationship between coercive power and ideas. And this is where we get into a lot of stuff that is deep in the American conversation. Is it okay to punch a Nazi? Well, if a Nazi is doing Nazi-like things, breaking the law, the state should lock them up. Can you punish people for ideas? And Sam Harris would say, and I think everyone on that stage would say, well, that's exactly where these totalitarian regimes went wrong. And Sam is trying to say, okay, well, it's not necessarily the content of these ideas, it's the practice of punishing people for ideas and not letting people talk about ideas. Cool. I'm down with that. But he's going to spend most of the night complaining about the content of ideas.
Okay, so that's another point of agreement then, I would say, because part of the reason that I've been, let's say, a free speech advocate, although I don't think that's the right way of thinking about it, is because I think of free discourse, like the discourse that we're engaged in, as the mechanism that corrects totalitarian excess or dogmatic excess. And so I also think that systems...
So in other words, if you have an institution that says the strawberry eaters and the rotten potato eaters need to be able to talk to each other, that's helpful. Because at some point, the potato eaters are going to say, hey, you munch on some potatoes, share your strawberries with us.
Of governance that are laying themselves out properly have to elevate the process by which dogmatic errors are corrected over the dogmas themselves, which is why I think
And the process of correcting dogmatic errors, how is this process maintained? Well, we write it down. Well, how is that represented? How does it get written down? Well, you write it down someplace really important where everyone agrees, like in a constitution. Yeah, and once you write it in a constitution, what has it become? A dogma. And Peterson is saying, yeah, dogmas are important.
Americans are right, say, with regard to their First Amendment, is the process of free speech is the process by which dogmatic errors are rectified, and so it has to be put at the pinnacle of the hierarchy of values, something like that.
No, I think you and I totally agree about the primacy of free speech.
Okay.
And is free speech a dogma?
Okay, good. Okay, so that's another. Fine.
Come on, Jordan, ask him if it's a dogma. Because if it's not a dogma, what?
Okay, so then
wait, I think there's one point that we should just lock in our gains here.
I love this part.
It sounds like what you're saying is that the reason to fear religious dogma is really on the dogma side and not the religion side, which at least leaves open the possibility that something could exist over on the religion side that doesn't have that characteristic, right? That often they travel in tandem, but that the thing to fear is not the religious belief, it is the dogmatic nature of the way it is conveyed.
Oh, yeah.
Is that fair?
The other way to say that is the only thing that's wrong with religion is the dogmatism.
Wait, I want to hear that again.
If you get rid of the I've got the only thing that's wrong with religion is the dogmatism.
Is that fair?
The other way to say that is the only thing that's wrong with religion is the dogmatism. The other way to say that is the only thing that's wrong with religion is the dogmatism.
Fair?
The other way to say that is the only thing that's wrong with religion is the dogmatism.
Fair?
The other way to say that is the only thing that's wrong with religion is the dogmatism.
Remember that. Because he won't.
If you get rid of the I've got no problem with the buildings and the music and the paintings and get rid of the I've got no problem with the buildings and the music and the paintings and
Wait a minute. That's not a trivial point, and it's not just a joke. Because
And Peterson jumps. Now when you get into the Dublin talk, they're going to come back to this. And it's important because basically Sam Harris is saying religion contaminates everything, and so we've got to get rid of it. Okay. Like the thought crime? We've got to get rid of these thoughts. Okay. But thought crimes are hugely problematic. Remember when he talked about blasphemy and apostasy? Blasphemy is saying wrong things. Apostasy is believing wrong things. And he's saying, but all the other expressions, the art and the buildings, I don't have a problem with. And it's like, really? Because, and again, and this is why Jordan Peterson pounces.
Because, wait a minute, that's not a trivial point, and it's not just a joke, because the buildings and the music are very important parts of the religious process. And so
they're important parts of the religious process. What does that mean? The buildings and the music and the art are part of the this is how, and we're going to get into some Protestantism here. This is how religious people are religious. It's how they be religious. It's how they express religion. If you see a cathedral, why do you if you're Sam Harris and you go into cathedral, I would think if he's consistent, he should have the same experience going into Auschwitz. This is the argument he's making. But why go into cathedral and say, look at the beautiful building, and not go into Auschwitz and say, I can appreciate the engineering and the efficiency of this place? No. So in this part of the talk, Sam Harris gives up the game a number of times. It's like saying, yeah, I fired Comey because of the Russia thing. Anybody listening? Lester Holt heard it. Saturday Night Live heard it.
I know there's a humorous element to that, but it's not like Sam is throwing out the baby with the bathwater there.
Sam Harris is keeping the baby because he's not sloshing the bathwater around at all.
To go further than that, I've got no...
In a sense, he wants to take the baby out of the bathwater and keep the bathwater. That's essentially what Sam Harris just said.
Problem. In fact, I'm deeply interested in the phenomenology of spiritual experience. So whatever experience someone like Jesus had, whoever he was historically, or any of the other matriarchs and patriarchs of the world's religions,
Muhammad too?
That phenomenology is subjectively real. I mean, it's diverse. I'm not saying everyone's had the same experience, but
it's subjectively real. Okay, let's get back to your definition of that which is real in your monarchical vision. What does it mean that something is subjectively real? Well, it means that I experienced it, and it's self-evident. There needs to be no validation of the experience. Okay, but that experience is going to make claims on future action and claims on interpretations of the past. And in a sense, Sam Harris is taking the baby out and keeping the bathwater here.
There are changes in consciousness that explain both how religions have gotten founded by their founders and the experiences people have had in the presence of those people or by following their methodologies.
Don't you think the dogmas came out of these experiences? Don't you think they had a vision for, not unlike Sam's vision, for reason, the elastic suitcase, and, imagine, John Lennon now is rolling around in my head, this is Sam Harris's vision for a new world, okay? And this is his subjective, real experience. I'm sure his hormones get excited and he gets impassioned when he thinks about this. And out of this flows dogmas. And in fact, most of these dogmas Sam Harris is going to give us, like, thou shalt not make rules based on bad evidence. It's a dogma. And it's a dogma you're promoting. Now, fortunately, again, we're living in a society where these dogmas are not backed up by the use of force, but you've just set down a dogma
that seem to be confirming of the dogmas that grew up around those traditions. And my issue is that whatever is true about us spiritually, whatever opportunity...
I want to know what he means by that word spiritually. Whatever's true of us spiritually, I think he means whatever's true of us experientially. So what word can you substitute in for spiritually? Experientially? Whatever we have experienced.
Being born into this universe actually presents as a matter of consciousness spiritually. That
used it again.
Whatever opportunity being born into this universe actually presents as a matter of consciousness spiritually. That truth has to be deeper than accidents of culture and just mere historical contingencies. And
what is he saying here?
People have had in the presence of those people or by following their methodologies that seem to be confirming of the dogmas that grew up around those traditions. And my issue is that whatever is true about us spiritually, whatever opportunity being born into this universe actually presents as a matter of consciousness spiritually, that truth has to be deeper than accidents of culture and just mere historical contingencies. The fact that somebody was born in Mesopotamia and not in China and got a different language game.
Did he just make an argument that the spiritual experiences of the great founders of religion say more about, say something more than the cultural and historical sum that leads up to those experiences? That's what he just said. Now, Jordan Peterson at this point inside, you see him lean forward here, he's got to be thinking, yeah, I fired Comey because of Russia. Game over. Cancel the other events. This is Jordan Peterson's big point. And so Sam Harris just gave away the religious versus the religion versus dogma, said it's the dogmatism, and now he says what the great founders of religions and spirituality experienced is greater than the sum total of the cultural accidents that led up to them. Okay. Say more.
So whatever is true there has to be understood in universal terms about the nature of human psychology, and
that's Jordan Peterson's entire project.
And the human mind.
Okay, so another thing that I wanted to just point out obliquely, and then
now we're going to go off the rails.
I want to return to outlining maybe where we agree.
We're not going to get back here.
Is that one of the things that was really shocking to me, I would say, was my reading of what was originally.
See, if we end it, and I'm going to end mine right here. If we ended it right here, after 20 minutes, you would say Jordan Peterson won. If you're paying attention, Sam Harris has both just completely given up any claim that religious dogmatism, that it's the dogmatism side, not the religion side, that is the real problem, and just said the spiritual experiences by the religious founders were not simply accidents of their culture and their time, but they express something universal about human beings. Jordan Peterson won. But with Jane Goodall and the chimps, we're going to descend into Mirkwood. So I'm going to call an end to this video right now, and on to the next one.